Welcome to Shorty Supercoach and welcome to Shorty's Say. May as well be called Shorty's Rant this week, and I like to save this little segment for things I actually care about rather than just having my say on meaningless things on a weekly basis. And look, I spoke about it last year around the Dangerfield topic and ineligibility if he were to get suspended in terms of the Brownlow, which did happen, and the controversy that surrounds it. And, you know, I bring up this topic with a few people in the office and a few people. It's not always a popular opinion, but I'm really strong in it. I really think we need to change it, or at least change the ruling slightly. It doesn't have to be a full 360. But the fairness element of the Brownlow must be looked at, and I think it must be changed. Now, obviously, Fyfe has copped a week. He'll challenge it. Fair enough. We'll see how it goes. But we've got to look at the bigger picture here. If we want to isolate this Fyfe incident, do I think he should have got a week? Yeah, probably. I'm comfortable with that getting a week, you know. Is it marginal? Yes. Will he potentially get off? I think it's a fair chance he might. I don't think it was malicious. You know, obviously it was aggressive. It was reckless. I don't think he intended to cause harm. He was potentially frustrated. Went the ball, you know, was a little bit clumsy, left the ground, etc., etc. This video isn't me, you know, going crazy about the fact he got a week. I'm not saying that we need to have one set of rules for everyone else and a set of rules for potential Brownlow medalists. It's just the penalty when we do give a suspension is just so tough in my opinion. You know, he won't be able to win the Brownlow. He's potentially leading it right now. Same happened the other year with Dangerfield. And we always tiptoe around this topic. It's like, oh, geez, has so-and-so thrown away their Brownlow? Will they be rubbed out? Why do we tiptoe around the subject? We're almost scared for it to happen, particularly when someone, you know, like Martin, you know, romps in the Brownlow, and we're almost hoping, praying that, oh, geez, I hope he doesn't do something silly in the last couple of rounds. You know, wouldn't it be just terrible if he lost the Brownlow and got rubbed out? It'd be an injustice. I don't see why. It's almost as if in our heart of hearts we don't want it to happen, but by the same token, we want to uphold a fair, reasonable sort of justice system for all footballers. You know, everyone gets the right to be dealt with by the same rules, and so they should. You know, Fyfe, if he gets a week, then so-and-so should get a week, you know, whether he's the 600th ranked player in the comp or number one, you know, should be dealt with the same brush. Now, I'm fine with that, but in my opinion, the best and fairest, the fairest element, you know, it's a traditional thing, and I'm a traditionalist. I love the day grand final. I love the bounce, but I don't have to be traditional about everything, and I think this needs to change. I think the fairness part, when I think of fairness, and when I think of the fairness coming in to the most prestigious award in our game, I think of making sure players that are thugs in the 80s, or, you know, snipers, or king hitting sort of guys, or blokes who would regularly get into fights. You know, that's what I think of. Or people who do hit, you know, it still sometimes happens, the occasional strike. But all that off-the-ball stuff, sniping stuff is gone. That's well gone. It's in the past. We need to get up with the times. Doesn't happen anymore. The one thing I would do, you know, I think potentially in the past it has been talked about ruling out the fairness element and just going free-for-all. I think there's got to be some sort of rider on it, because I understand, you know, people will say, well, you can't just have people potentially doing anything. You know, what if they did something, you know, pretty bad in the last couple of rounds? You know, didn't miss too much of the season, didn't miss too much of their voting potential. Win a Brownlow, did something shocking, miss all the final series in summer next year. I understand that. So my opinion, what I think we should do, I think we should scrap the fairness to a point. I know it gets a little bit grey area here, but the powers to be decide where your rider is. You know, is it ineligible if it's a striking charge? Is it something along those lines? Get people together and work out what elements of the game and acts within the game are unacceptable to award a Brownlow to that player. So whether it's striking, whether it's tripping, whether it's, you know, whatever it is, misconduct, have a group of things that people will be rubbed out of the Brownlow for. Do you potentially put a week's tally on it as well? Striking must be more than 2 weeks. I know it gets a little bit messy, but I think we've got to have that. This is the most prestigious award in our game for an individual. We need to get serious with it, because I'm telling you, at some point, I think people can live with Fyfe if he were to miss. You know, people are a bit annoyed with the fact that it was pretty rough. It was off the deck, you know. He probably went past the ball. I haven't watched it overly closely. You know, people can wear that, but there will be a time when a player gets done for the rule of the week. You know, they're cracking down on the tackle, or they're cracking down on something else, and he's slightly unlucky. He's a scapegoat for that week. It's 1 week. He's not an unfair player. He's not a dog of a player. He's not a thug. He's one of the best blokes in the game, one of the fairest, most respected players. But because we cracked down in May on the sling tackle or something like that, he now cannot take out what is rightfully his Brownlow. That will happen, and we'll all feel very guilty. We'll all feel embarrassed because we didn't make the call sooner. It might happen once in 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. But you don't make these decisions after they've happened once. It's like the dodgy car intersection where, gee, it's dangerous, and you only make a change in the signage or the traffic lights or a roundabout after someone's died. You know, it takes something actually bad or wrong to happen for things to get fixed. So I think we've got to stop waiting around for when we are embarrassed and actually do something about it beforehand. I don't want to see some of our best players in the game rubbed out of the Brownlow for things that are just so minor in the big scheme of football. I'm happy with Fyfe getting a week. You know, send a message. That's fine. You know, you can't do that, Nat. But it's not that bad. It is not a bad act. He's not a dog. You know, it's nothing terrible like that. You know, is Alex Rance going to miss because he takes a dive? Who cares? He's not going to win the Brownlow. You know, and what about Tom Mitchell the other week? Didn't he elbow Goldstein in the head? Did I miss something there? How did he get off? And in the past, we've seen us tiptoe around the subject. It was Nat Fyfe himself, wasn't it, where the AFL decided not to give him a third fine, which would have equalled a suspension, when he should have, because of the Brownlow. You know, I think we put ourselves in this awkward situation where we almost don't want to give out what should be the decision because it's going to really destroy one of the best nights of the calendar. And the inconsistency within the actual MRO or the MRP, you know, there's inconsistencies in the whole system from week to week, from panel to panel, from year to year, from week to week. We are harsher on certain rules and interpretations. And I just think we've really got to map out exactly what we want. And I think we should be allowed to see an incident from whoever it is, mark that incident for what it is, and don't have to be thinking about in the back of your mind, am I putting this guy to the Brownlow for something that, yes, probably just warrants a suspension. You know, maybe it just ticks over into what is a 1 weeker, but we're going to rule him out. You know, I'm fine with, you know, some dog bloke who's hit someone behind play. Not that it ever happens anymore. It's not the 80s now. You know, he hits a bloke behind play, gets 4 weeks. I'm fine with that guy missing. That's where I think he should have some sort of rider on it and some little asterisk. In my opinion, if someone does something minor, you know, take, you know, example, Paddy Dangerfield last year, you know, I think that was minor, you know, maybe a tad reckless. I don't think that's a shocking act in our game. You know, I think the main penalty, he's not getting off scot-free. He misses the chance to poll another 3 votes or another 6 votes if someone misses 2 weeks or what have you. But I think there are times when we want to suspend players or send a message or do something, but it doesn't necessarily mean they are this unfair player and a player just not willing or able to win our great award. I think it's ridiculous. And people bring up, you know, oh, it's the Brownlow, that's just the rule, that's just how it is. Well, get with the times. I don't care. Throw your Players Association award at me all you like. I don't care how good or how big that is getting. Yeah, you want to be voted by your peers, but I'm telling you, it's not the first thing that you get reeled off at the Hall of Fame night. You're either a Brownlow medalist or you're not. And I'll tell you what, if you won a Brownlow and a Player Association MVP, I'll tell you which one you'll be remembered for. So get it right. That's just my humble opinion. I'll take a quick look at a couple of notes I took down, whether there was anything I wanted to cover off on. Doesn't look like it. Shorty smacked it out of the park. But give me your opinion. I don't think I've forgotten anything that I wanted to mention. If you want it in dot point form, I'm happy with the Fyfe suspension. That's fine. Doesn't bother me that much. Don't rule him out of the Brownlow. It's a minor incident in the big scheme of things. You know, it's not Tom Bug hitting a bloke or doing whatever off the ball. He's not breaking jaws. You know, please, we do not want players being ruled out of the Brownlow. Don't tell me Nate Fyfe's a dog. And don't tell me he's a thug. He attacks the ball. He toes a fine line. Don't tell me that that's what we're getting rid of blokes for the Brownlow. Please, give me a spell. I'm just saying we should be able to judge each and every case without this cloud over the match review panel's head or Christian's head, whoever it is at the time, that potentially they're making a far bigger decision than what is that incident. They're making a big decision that'll be talked about for years because their decision affects the Brownlow. I just don't think it's necessary. It would be such a minor change. The people who do bad acts and strike or off the ball, however you want to group together those ineligible acts, they'll still get penalised. They'll still be rubbed out. But there has to be a certain part of our game that you can be suspended, but it isn't ruled as this unfair dog act sort of incident. Whether it's in tackling or the rule of the week, we see them. We see him crack down, and sometimes there's a scapegoat. You know, is it Mumford? Is it Zeeble? We see it all the time. But we'll have egg on our face when it happens early in the season. It's a Brownlow medalist, or it happens late in the season. You know, depending on the system they have any given year. You know, we could see a guy in round 22, round 23, and I just don't think we want to see that. I mean, if you take anything from this video, a lot of people probably won't agree with it. But do you feel comfortable with players missing for those minor acts? I think everyone's talking about Twilight Grand Finals. Everyone's keen to ditch the bounce and let's change this, let's change that. Why can't we bloody just change this? It would make it far simpler. It would take away that potential guilt and embarrassment. And I personally just want to see the best players win the Brownlow. I don't think there's any snipers out there. I don't think there's any dog players who deliberately go out there to hit people like there were back in the 80s and those guys get ruled out. Minor incidents, maybe you have a rider for potentially bigger ones just to make sure that we don't have egg on our face for fully getting rid of the fairness and then someone wins a Brownlow when they did an act that was quite bad, which potentially could happen too. So do your homework. The AFL, work out a set of rules that we can get this right. Because I'm telling you, one day we'll wish we did it, but instead someone will be without a Brownlow and we'll make the change the next year. Cheers.